Hi everyone! Welcome to the Practice 3 Photoshop practice video. This video will align with this assignment in my CIS120DF Photoshop Level 1 class. I thought I would take you through this assignment as well as show you a few other things that are not included in it, so to obviously enhance your learning and experience with Photoshop. So I have my window split. I'm working on a PC and Photoshop on the left and the assignment on the right, just so it makes it a little bit easier to follow along. So the first thing I want you to do is, I've already downloaded the files and the instructions, and then I've already opened Photoshop. Now I could just go File, Open, and look for my file, which happens to be saved in my downloads, but I want to highlight the Bridge program, which you experience in one of the first two chapters of the textbook. And so to do that, you can go File, Browse in Bridge, and Bridge is the file management program that comes with the Adobe Suite, and so here's the window. It's opened up right here. And it's way more robust than if you were to use Finder on the Mac or Windows Explorer on the PC. It's actually meant to work with the Adobe Suite and the many different applications. So there's a lot of different tools and things that you can do inside Bridge that you would not be able to do with the traditional operating system file management program like Windows Explorer or Finder. So you want to go ahead and navigate to wherever you've saved your file. I happen to save mine in my downloads. If I go to this PC, zoom down a little bit, and I can open up the downloads, you can see there's the instruction file and there is the practice file. So just in terms of looking at this environment and explaining what's going on, you know, I have my drives over here. I can actually filter how I search for files on my computer. We're not going to talk about any of that. It's way more advanced than beyond the scope of this class. But in terms of looking at this folder, you can see up here, here's the path, this PC Windows user Sarah downloads. This is on my computer. I've got two files here and I can click on them. It doesn't matter that this is a PDF and this is a PSD file. And when you click on the different files, you can see that there's different information over here on the right. I can actually zoom up in this window so I can have a larger thumbnail. I can change how to look at it. I can have a grid. I can have just your standard thumbnail. I can have the image with information displayed to the right. I can do it in a list format. It's totally up to you. I can do just thumbnails or tiles. So you have a lot of different options. There's no wrong or right. It's what works for you. And when you click on the image, you can see over here on the right that there's actually a lot of different pieces of information that are contained within this Photoshop file. The name, what software we're using, when the file was actually created. This Photoshop file actually comes from an earlier version of the textbook. I like to reuse, you know, the file's good, there's nothing wrong with it, and then I can build an assignment off of it. So this was actually created in 2007 and modified today, or the time that I'm making this video. You can see it's just over a megabyte, and it's about 2.7 inches by 2 inches in physical size, and then just other information. If you scroll through, you can see there's all this different kind of information that you can look up about it or is attached to the file. There's also this tab right here called Keywords, which you can actually associate keywords with your different files, again, just to help you search and organize the files on your computer. And then when you click on each one of these images, you get a little preview over here. So what's really cool is if I were clicking on an Illustrator file, I would still see the Illustrator preview. If I was clicking on a Premiere file or a Flash or After Effects or whatever Adobe program I'm using InDesign, I would be able to see a thumbnail preview over here in the window, which you would not get using your traditional programs like Windows Explorer and Finder. All right, so you can explore this environment as much as you like. There's a lot of stuff going on. You don't have to use it. We will explore it a couple of times throughout the semester, and it does come with the Adobe Suite. I'm going to go ahead and double click the Photoshop file to open it up. I'm going to go ahead and close Bridge so that we just have as much room as possible. All right, so step 4 wants me to rename the file, so I'm going to go ahead and go File, Save As, and then you're going to go ahead and navigate wherever you want to save it. I'm going to save it in my downloads. You can see the file name is selected. If I click one time at the end of the file and I press backspace 4 times, I can go ahead and get rid of the .psd. 5 more times I can get rid of that start word at the end, and I can just type my name. Now you can do the last name first or the first name first. I don't care how you do it, just as long as you always append your name to the end of your files. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And then you can see right up here in the Photoshop window, there's the name of the file that I've renamed. All right, step 5 wants us to reset the workspace to Essentials. Now, last project I talked about workspaces, and you can access that up here in the upper right corner. Now, I already have the Essentials workspace set up. When I say to reset Essentials, what I'm trying to do is emulate the experience you're having with your textbook so that the custom assignments I've created sort of line up so you have kind of similar experiences. All that's going to do is it's going to put this environment, Photoshop, back to the way the Essentials workspace is laid out, with the Tools panel would be in a single column. These panels would expand more, which is totally fine. I'm not going to do the Reset Essentials, and in fact, you can skip this step if you like. It's totally fine. If you're starting to like how you have your Photoshop environment set up, you know, I like to have my tools in 2 columns, not 1. I have some standard panels over here that I always like to have docked so I can see them, and it makes it easier for me to use. So I'm just going to go ahead and not do step 5, and you don't have to either. You can skip that step. All right, so step 6 says right-click the background layer and choose duplicate layer. So you definitely need to have the layers panel open. I have it over here on the right. I have a shortcut to layers. If you don't, you can go to Window, Layers, and that would go ahead and open up that layers panel. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click on the background layer and choose duplicate layer. We've done this before. And I'm going to rename this Working Layer. If I could spell. There we go. Okay, and so as a reminder, you can't do anything to a background layer. Right now it's locked and it's a special layer called background. I can't do anything to it until I change its name. I could have just changed the background layer to working layer, but it is considered a best practice, especially here at the very beginning of learning Photoshop, is to duplicate your original artwork so that if I mess up working layer, I could trash this and start over from background. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the crop tool from the tools panel, and I want to ensure the options bar is set to original ratio with no values. Let me scroll through this a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and hide the layers panel just because my environment's a little bit smaller. I have 2 windows open on 1 monitor. So just to hide the layers panel, if I click the layers tab, boom, it just slides right back in there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and choose the crop tool over here. And then I want to make sure up here on the options bar that I have original ratio. And if you have numbers in these boxes, you just want to click on them, highlight them, and press backspace. So I'm just kind of starting over the fresh crop. Remember, cropping is allowing us to cut off edges of the document. So in this case, you can see I have some white area, but I'm also challenged because the image is tilted, right? It's not exactly horizontal and vertical. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. One of them is in the instructions, one is not. So the first thing you can do to crop this image is I can come up here to this upper left corner and kind of pull in the sizing handle till it comes to about the edge. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I can pull up the bottom right one as well. You know, it's all right. That looks pretty good. You can see it's starting to crop it. Everything that's outside the crop area, if I were to click crop right now, everything outside that crop area will go away. But before I do that, I can actually rotate the image before I crop it. And so the way you can do that is I can place my cursor out here to the upper right corner or the upper left corner, whichever you prefer, or even in the bottom, doesn't matter. What you're looking for is that curved arrow. And once I see that curved arrow, I'm going to left click, hold, and start dragging. Now if I drag to the right, you can see it tilts it more to the right. If I drag to the left, oh, look at this. I have this grid. I can kind of eyeball it. We're not looking for perfection here. Oh, you know what? That looks pretty good. Okay, so now, hey, look at that. I've rotated it. I could actually pull this cropping handle in a little bit more, get rid of the white edges. It's totally okay if I'm cutting off part of the edge of the image. That's, for this assignment, we're not too worried about it. And then I could just press the Enter key. Boom. I can press the Enter key. There we go. Sorry, wrong Enter key. And then it crops it. Look at that. That's perfect, right? Or nearly perfect. Looks pretty good. Now, if I didn't like that, I could always go back in the history panel. The history panel is your friend. Remember that the history panel always shows you all the steps that you have completed in a particular session. So while this file is open, every click, every adjustment, everything that I do is saved. It is a finite amount of steps. Once you get to a certain point of working, it only will save so many steps, and that is actually based on the amount of RAM that you have, and you can actually change that setting in some of the advanced settings. We're not worried about it, but I always mention these things because students will always say, but can you do this? Can you change this? And usually the answer to most questions is yes, you can change pretty much almost anything and edit anything. But remember, we're at the very, very beginning, so I'm showing you things from the beginning. If you don't have a shortcut to the history panel, window and history, okay? And so the history panel is great because if you mess up, you can go backwards in time, right? All right, so I showed you how we did that first crop. I'm actually going to go backwards one step and put the image back the way it was because I actually want to show you another way to crop and rotate it. All right, so I'm going to click this crop tool again to turn it back on. Now, before I actually pull the corners in, there's actually a tool up here on the crop options bar called straighten, and if I click this, that turns it on right here, and then you can see my cursor changes the little crosshair, and you can see the little it actually is a little ruler, right? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a point. I'm actually going to draw a line across this edge, and that's telling Photoshop, hey, that's the horizontal, and so I want you to pull it up to make that horizontal. So I'm going to click here, click, left click, hold, drag. I didn't let go of the mouse, right? And I'm just kind of eyeballing it to the end. And then when I let go, look at that. What? That was so fast. So you could do either method. You could pull it at the corner and rotate it. You can use that straighten option. And then I can pull these cropping handles in to get rid of the excess white. You know, if I pull that out, you know, it's totally okay that you are getting rid of some of the image. I can even click in the center of my image and drag it around a little bit, you know, when you're satisfied. Okay. All right. So I'm good with that. I'm going to press the enter key. Boom. Right. Oh, look at that. I still have a little bit of the white edge. If I wanted to get rid of that, I could click the crop tool again and I could pull it up a little bit more. Right. If I just want to be perfect. Boom. Okay. All right. So that was step 7 and 8, 9 and 10. So we're at step 11. I'm going to do a Control S to save it. Remember, the first time you save it, you're getting this maximize compatibility. At this point, you guys could click the don't show again. I'm going to leave mine on because as a teacher and I'm creating things all the time, I like my Photoshop to kind of look the same way that it looks for you. So there is consistency. So this is just saying, hey, I'm saving a version of this. Photoshop's going to save a version of this so that you can preview it in older versions. So I'm going to click OK. Boom. All right, let's come on up. We're at step 12 up here. All right, so you can see that there is definitely this yellow cast to the image. It doesn't look great, right? So we want to go ahead and do what's called color correction. So this is one of very powerful skill that you're learning early on. You could open up pictures that you have at home and you can color correct them. You actually did it in previous assignments, so we're going to do it again. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to add what's called an adjustment layer. So here's my layers panel right here. So I want you to add an adjustment. If you don't have the adjustments panel open, you can go to Window, Adjustments, that opens it up. And I'm going to add a levels. All right, so that's this one right here. Levels is adjusting the blacks and the whites and the grays. And so I click this icon and it adds an adjustment levels layer. And I actually can see that if I go back to the layers panel, you can see that it added this layer in called levels 1. This is an adjustment layer. Adjustments are what are called non-destructive editing techniques. Non-destructive means I'm putting this layer above the working layer. And whatever I do here, it's affecting working layer, but it's not actually changing the pixels. Meaning if I got rid of this layer, this original image hasn't been destroyed or manipulated or altered in any way. So it's non-destructive. And we're going to talk more about layers coming up, but right now what I want you to understand is that layers, you can have multiple layers in Photoshop. They stack upon each other. Background will be the one at the bottom. Levels will be at the one at the top. You can, whatever's at the top is closest to you, closest to your face, closest to what you're seeing. You can think of layers as clear sheets of paper stacked on top of each other, see-through transparencies, and so that you can move them and adjust them and change what's called the stacking order. You can make things appear in front or behind, so on and so forth. Okay, so we have this levels adjustment layer, and when you have an adjustment layer to actually modify the properties, you want to open up properties. If you don't have properties here, you can go to Window, Properties, or if you're in the Layers panel, I can actually just double click this little icon to the left, the layer thumbnail, boom, double click that, and it opens up the properties for it. All right, so I can actually pull menus out and have them float around if I want, to make it a little bit easier while I'm working on things so I can see it. So what I'm trying to do is I want to actually tell Photoshop, hey, I want you to adjust the colors based on the darks and the lights. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to choose the black eyedropper. I'm going to choose that as a sample first. And what that's letting me do is I'm going to tell Photoshop, hey, I'm going to pick the darkest area and you're going to adjust everything to that dark point. So I'm going to go ahead and click this eyedropper to turn it on. I'm going to pull my cursor out here to the image. And then this area right underneath to me seems to be like the darkest, the closest to black in the image. So I'm going to kind of click it. And you can see whatever dot I pick, whatever pixel I click on, it adjusted everything to that, saying that's the black and everything else is going to fall in line to that. If I didn't like it, I could pick another one. Look at that, I clicked it, just adjusted a little bit more. And so again, this can be subjective. So you're looking for your best guess, what looks good to you. Now, personally, I like things that are darker, so what I think looks great, somebody else might not. Remember, this is not an art class. This is a CIS. CIS is Computer Information Systems. So you are learning Photoshop from the standpoint of how to use this tool to create solutions in a business environment. So that's kind of, I like to explain that because I don't want anybody out there listening to this be like, oh my God, I've never taken an art class. I don't know what looks good or bad. That's okay. I'm not judging you on that. You're not being graded on that, okay? All right, so I picked my black point. That was this step 13 over here. If I didn't like it, I could always go back in the history, come back up here, go backwards in time one step, and try again. It's totally up to you. I'm going to go ahead. I'm good. I like the way this looks. So now I'm going to pick the white point. So that's the opposite end of the scale. So I'm going to sample a white area. And to me, the whitest area in this image happens to be this little kind of brick area above her head. So I can kind of click in here until I'm kind of happy with that. It brightens it up a little bit. And there you go. And so I've set the black and the white point. I'm going to kind of scroll up over here in our instructions. Okay, and so now, so we adjusted the blacks and the whites. So there's some other things that we can do. That's just what we've done is we've kind of set the colors for the overall image, but we can actually adjust the reds, the blues, and the green because this is an RGB image. We can actually adjust all the red pixels, all the blue pixels, all the green pixels. So what I'm having you do from the color drop-down list in the properties panel, change the color spectrum from RGB to red. So we're at step 16A. So right here, we're going to go from RGB. We're going to just look at the reds, and this picture you're looking at down here, this graph, this is called a histogram, and this is where it's just showing you the ranges of color. So in this case, we're looking at how all the reds peak and drop off. All right, so what we can do is we can pull these sliders in. I'm kind of showing you in the example, you can kind of see red falls off. This is showing you where this graph starts to go flat. This means the reds are falling off. So if I were to drag this slider in a little bit to the right, you see how if I pull it out, it gets more red. If I'm pulling it in, it's really adding those blues and greens back in to just kind of balance out. So this is really refining the picture even more than just clicking with some buttons, okay? And so you can do that and you can really kind of get a nice realistic looking picture, kind of getting rid of those casts. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put this properties panel back over here. I like it to live in my little adjustments dock. You can have it in any order you want over here. It's totally up to you. I always say, in your kitchen at home, where you put your forks is totally different than where I keep my forks, okay? But as long as you know where the forks are, you're good to go. All right, so what's really cool about this, I'm going to open up the layers panel, is if I turn off the visibility, it's still here, but if I turn this eyeball off levels 1, you can see that's what the original image looked like. And now this is what it looks like. Wow. Wow, that looks so much better. Oh my gosh, it's like you could pay me money to do this. Yes. Now what I would tell you at this point, if you're actually watching this video, is that you might go home and tell somebody, hey, I totally know how to correct picture color now. Well, first of all, there's a lot more to it than just what I showed you, but even with just these simple tricks, be careful who you share this information with. You don't want to become the person all of a sudden who's fixing 1,000 of your mom's pictures from back in the day, right? You got a lot of homework coming your way, but you can do that. I've already given you some tips here, some tricks to just start making simple corrections to images. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this file at save or Control S. Remember, these pull down menus have the keyboard shortcuts over here to the right. And many of you always want to know what those keyboard shortcuts are. All right, scrolling along. Okay, so instruction one way. Step 18, press the tab key on the keyboard to hide all panels. All right, so this is a neat little trick. So I'm over here inside Photoshop. If I actually press the tab key on the keyboard, watch what happens. It hid my tools, the options bar, and all the panels. This is just a nice way for you to look at your beautiful artwork without getting the distraction of the actual environment. If I press tab again on the keyboard, everything comes back. So that's a nice little tip for you. If you hold shift and tab, it hides everything except the tools panels. And then shift tab again. Okay, so again, tons of keyboard shortcuts to do all kinds of interesting things. All right, I'm going to go ahead and hide the layers panel. I can click layers or I can click the little double chevron. If I double click the hand tool, you've learned this already. I double click this, it fits the image to the entire window. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to repair this image. We're going to kind of clean up this wall at the top, right? We have all this graffiti below, which looks kind of cool, but it'd be nice if right above this kind of invisible line, we just make it all brick, right? I can get rid of this thing here. I can get rid of this graffiti maybe, and just kind of give it a nice little cleanup. Okay, so we're going to learn one of many cloning tools. So today we're going to use what's called the clone stamp. So go to the layers panel and select the working layer. So I'm going to be making my repair on this layer, working layer. We're going to use the clone stamps tool. What we're going to do is we're going to pick up good pixels from one area and lay them down in another area. So I want to go ahead and click the zoom tool and just zoom into this so I can get a really nice close-up view. Now, here's a shortcut for you. I clicked the zoom tool. That's what's active. You can see my cursor even looks like a magnifying glass. Press the space bar on the keyboard. I'm holding the space bar down. You can see my cursor change to that hand tool, and then I can click and drag, right? So that's actually letting me activate another tool. I'm letting go of the space bar, and you can see I have the magnifying glass is still active. So you can activate other tools. So if one tool is active, you can click some buttons on the keyboard and as a shortcut activate another tool. I use that one all the time. That one works. It doesn't matter what tool I've clicked on. I press the space bar and immediately that activates the pan or hand, and I can move my image around the document window, right? Okay, if I press Alt, see I'm in positive zoom or zooming up. If I hold the Alt key, that lets me zoom back out, right? So I can get a really nice view. You can also come down here in the lower left corner. I'm zoomed in 300%. You can manually type in a number. It doesn't matter. It's what works for you. Okay, I'm going to choose the clone stamp tool over here. In the tools bar, you can see there's clone stamp and pattern stamp. If I click and hold on that, it's showing me both. I just want clone stamp. And now my cursor changes to a circle, which is actually a brush. It's using what's called a brush or a brush tip. All right. So for right now, what I want you to do is dial in some settings. So on the option bar with the clone stamp, here's my brush options. I can click the arrow down, and I want you to do a brush size of 21. Clearly I was working on this assignment before I opened it up. That's why the settings are already there. You want the hardness to be at 0. So what that means, if you imagine you had a brush in your hand, a hardness being a 0 means it's going to be a solid edge. The increasing the hardness makes it a softer looking brush, kind of like how this one looks right here. It's got a fuzzy edge. It really just depends on what you're doing. And then this one's important. Up here on the options bar, we want a line to have a check mark next to it. And I'm going to show you here in a minute what that does, what the difference between that is. Now, I'm going to stop because this isn't in the assignment. But if you don't see this aligned option, you might not have the toolbar showing correctly. So if you're missing some of the options up here on the options bar, you need to go to Edit, Preferences, Workspace. And if you have a check mark right here under Condensed Enable Narrow Options, you want to uncheck that, click OK, exit Photoshop, and restart it, and then come back to this point. And then you'll see you'll have the full toolbar. So by default, the Enable Narrow Options is turned on. If this is, if you just installed Photoshop a few weeks ago, you might have this setting turned on. So you want to make sure that's unchecked. I'm going to hit cancel. Okay, and then you have to restart Photoshop to actually get those settings to appear. All right, so assuming you have that, we put a check mark here next to aligned. We have some additional options we're going to set. So we're going to go to Window, Clone Source. So really now this is opening another panel where we can actually make even more refinements to this tool. You want to make sure that you have a check mark next to Show Overlay, and you want to make sure you have a check mark next to Clipped, and you want to make sure the opacity is set at 100%. I'm going to go ahead and hide this panel, right? Close that, collapse it. And so now the magic. What I want to do is I want to replace this area here with some good bricks. Okay, so literally what I'm going to do is I have my cursor. I'm going to hold the Alt key down. So I'm holding the Alt key down, and now you can see my cursor change to this kind of little crosshairs. What's happening is, and I still have the Alt key pressed, is wherever I click, and I'm going to click right here one time, and now I'm going to let go of the Alt key. What's happening is it's sucking up this area of the bricks, and when I come over here, I'm going to left click, hold, and drag. Do you see that little crosshairs? What's happening is it's taking the bricks where the crosshairs are and allowing me to paint over, right? Click and drag. Click and drag. Now, because I grabbed at the edge of my document, see that hard line right there? That grabbed the edge of the document here. I don't like that. So I can go backwards in my history panel, right? Maybe I want to grab some new bricks. So I'm going to press Alt, create a new sample point. So Alt click. So now you can see those crosshairs are following it, right? Maybe I do Alt click over here. More bricks, right? Okay. And so the click and then I can go the opposite way, right? Right? So you don't want to grab everything. You don't want to try to make one long drag. You want to click and drag, sample drag, so that you're repairing the image. You're literally painting over it, right? If I press the hand tool, I can kind of move around. And the goal for you here, like if I come over here and I Alt click, right? Left and right, left and right, left and right, left and right. So I am painting, right? I might Alt click over here. And here we go, right? So I'm just kind of holding the hand tool down and I'm repairing the image, right? If I double click my hand tool, that looks pretty good. If I really want to see my work, I can come to layers. If I turn off the visibility of working layer, that's the original. Working, that's the original, right? And so you can always go back and forth and compare your work, which you definitely want to be doing. All right, I'm going to zoom in again. So now I want to show you something. This isn't in the assignment. I'm going to go back to the clone tool. So we're going to play more with this tool later on, but when I have a line check, what's happening is when I click my sample point, when I select it, Alt click, that area has literally been sucked up into the, actually I'm going to click up here, into my paintbrush. So when I come down here and paint over the girl, right, as I move down, it's grabbing it. It's aligned with that crosshairs. Okay, I'm going to go backwards one step. But if I uncheck aligned, this is how you can get how I could make another copy of the girl. I'm going to Alt click on her hat, right? And I'm going to come over here and it's pulling the girl, right? Now I'm going to come over here. It's still pulling where I originally clicked. Okay. So if I come down here, it's still going to pull from that original area. So not making it checked align, it leaves my source point. It doesn't move along with my cursor, right? If I go backwards, one more, just to show that again. If I put the check mark here and now I click, I suck up the area where her hair is, I'm going to go down, right? Okay, I got the girl. But now if I come over here, I'm still getting, it's still aligned with the original source point. I'm not getting that girl. It's not linked to that where I set that source point, where I sucked up into the paintbrush. Okay, so that is the cloning tool. So what I want you to do is I want you to spend some time repairing this wall. Okay, I'm not going to spend the whole video doing that, but you can repair the wall. I'm looking for everything above the yellow. I have had students who just had so much fun with the assignment, they got rid of all the graffiti and made it back to a regular old brick wall. If that's you and you want to do it, go for it. The more time you spend with the tools, the better. Okay, so I'm looking for you to at least fix the top third of this wall or top fourth of this wall, and then with the assignment, when you're done with the assignment, you're going to go ahead and make a JPEG, and to do that you're just going to go File, Save As. You're going to choose JPEG from the Save As type. You can leave it with the same name. You click Save. You will get this options box and you can go ahead and click OK, and that would make your copy of the image as a JPEG. And then you're going to turn in the JPEG file. So this is a very quick follow-up to the book work that you're doing this week. So you definitely want to complete this assignment, have fun with it, and if you have any other questions, please let me know. Thank you.